Aemeath has just been shown off in the version 3.1 livestream, but with just how many aspects she has in her kit, what is she actually good for? That's what I'm going to be discussing in today's video by giving you Aemeath's biggest pros and cons. Starting with, of course, the fact that she is going to end up becoming one of the strongest DPS characters in the entire game. If you haven't noticed from all of the marketing they're giving this character, Aemeath is going to be the Sentinel Resonator equivalent for Lahairoi. She is the Cardathea of the region, she is the Jinchi, which means that naturally, she is setting an entirely new bar in terms of damage output. When Cardathea released, she was by far the best DPS in the game, at least in tower, and when Jinchi released, she was also the by far best DPS in the game. You can expect a very similar story to be happening with Aemeath. And considering the fact that to this day, Cardathea is still one of the best DPS characters in the entire game within Tower of Adversity, and she's still clearing Wuthering Waves just fine, you can expect that pulling Aemeath now and using her best in slot team is going to give you one of the longest lasting carries for your entire account. You're going to get an absolute ton of mileage out of this character. I doubt I need to explain to you why getting the potential best DPS in the entire game might end up being a very good decision. So if you're in need of a good DPS character, just consider getting Aemeath. Her best in slot team is going to be using two of the most universal characters in the entire game, and there's a pretty good chance you've already picked them up. So if you're just in need of a good DPS, just try and pick up an Aemeath, honestly. The second point is kind of an extension of the first point because, well, there's absolutely zero doubt in my mind that Aemeath is going to be the best Fusion DPS in the entire game. Now, why does being a good Fusion DPS matter? First of all, Fusion actually has some pretty good competition. Galbrenna is in my opinion a very solid unit, and she is in my opinion the best Fusion DPS. So for me to say that I believe Aemeath is going to be just straight up better does actually have some meaning. But why does attribute matter here? I thought that you believed attributes didn't mean anything for the character. Well, that's not entirely true, because attributes are actually very relevant when it comes to enemy resistances, and resistances can be quite a pain. At a certain point, characters can be entirely countered by enemies that simply resist their element, so making sure you have at least some variety in the attributes of your teams is actually rather important. If your account only consists of arrow DPS characters, you're going to be absolutely demolished the second tower throws an arrow-resistant boss at you, so you want at least some variety. In my opinion, having good DPSs of 3 attributes is enough, which is half of the attributes in the game, and thus getting a good Fusion DPS is in my opinion a pretty good idea. Something else that's very nice about Aemeath is that she is going to be able to interact with a lot of different gameplay elements. Those elements being Toon Rupture and Negative Status in particular. This is something incredibly unique, and it's only something that we've really seen before with Linné. But Linné is kind of just... I don't think she counts as much, because she interacts with Toon Rupture and Toon Strain, which are both Toon Rupture related mechanics. Meanwhile, Aemeath interacts with Toon Break, but then also interacts with Negative Status. So why is this a good thing? First of all, teammate variety. The issue with characters like Cardathea and Zani, in my opinion, is that negative status teammates are incredibly exclusive, and they can only really use characters that interact with negative status. So Aemeath can basically avoid this issue because she can also be good in a Toon Break team. So this restriction in teammates that characters like Cardathea and Zani suffer from is something that you're really not going to notice that much with Aemeath. Because Aemeath ultimately has options. It's literally a part of her kit that she can go multiple directions. Another very nice benefit of this is that it's honestly pretty hard to make some sort of shield tower that's bad for this character. You can make a tower that's bad for negative status, and she can just run a Toon Rupture team. You can make a tower that's bad for Toon Rupture, and she'll just end up running negative status. It's very hard for Kuro Games to actively get rid of this character's relevance. Even if they put some sort of shield chill in there, the fact that she's Fusion allows her to use Brant. So ultimately, it's very easy for Aemeath to just ignore anti-shield. And this links up pretty well with my fourth point, being the fact that Aemeath has a bunch of teams that she's able to use. And when I say a bunch of teams, I do mean quite a bunch. Her best team on release is going to be a team of Linné and Mornia. But honestly, I can see many people simply not having this team because, well, Lene and Mornia were literally the two previous characters. There's a very high chance you simply do not have them. Well, no fear, because it's not like they're both needed. You can simply use a team of Lene and Shorekeeper, or simply using a team of Lupa and Mornier. Are you going to feel the drop-off? Absolutely, you are going to feel the drop-off. But Aemeath is most likely still going to be stupid broken enough to just not care. And what if you don't have either of them? What if you skip both Lene and Mornier? Well, simple. You can run either the Brant Lupa core, or the Chongli Lupa core, or even the Mortefi Lupa core. This character has quite a good amount of team options. And sure, currently they're pretty contingent on you owning Lupa, Lene, or Mornier, but as we get more Toon Break related supports in the future, maybe a signature support for Luke, we're gonna end up getting more supports that are good with Aemeath. And not to mention any sort of fusion burst buffer that we're going to get will also be good for an Aemeath teammate. So really, she already has good teammates and there's a very high chance she's only going to get more. Another very nice positive for this character is that because she's a sword character, she doesn't actually need her signature weapon to be good. Emerald of Genesis is yet again saving the life of every single sword character in the game. This is because Aemeath can use her skill very freely throughout her rotation. It's honestly just kinda funny just how easily this character is able to insert her skill, which allows you to stack Emerald of Genesis passive to 2 stacks very fast. Combining this with the crit rate on Emerald of Genesis as well as its energy regen gets you a very solid standard banner option. So for those who simply do not have the pulse to get Aemeath's signature weapon, you'll be completely fine even if you don't get it. This character is very easy to just use on Emerald of Genesis. I'm very glad to see that all of the newer characters since Galbrenna have a good standard banner weapon option. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, obviously. This character does have some negatives. One of which being that her teams at low cost are questionable at best and downright bad at worst. This is because Aemeath not only has a pretty split damage split, one of the damage types she deals is also just one that we really can't buff much at the moment. Her damage is primarily Liberation and Toon Rupture, and I'm pretty sure you can already guess what the issue here. We don't have a single 4-star Liberation buffer, and the only 5-star one we have is pretty bad. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that the only real way to buff Toon Rupture is by giving someone more Toon Break boost. And guess what the literal only source of Toon Break boost is right now? Yep, you're right, it's Lene. So that means that a lot of Aemeath's damage simply cannot be buffed by characters that do not contribute to team cost. Now sure, this is remedied a bit by the fact that Lene can use Static Mist, Aemeath can use Emerald of Genesis, and Mornia can easily use Discord. But the issue here is ultimately with teammates, and if you're trying to run something like Gen Shin with Mornia, you're not going to end up getting good results. If you want something for the same cost, you will ultimately want to look at something like Mortefi Lupa, but there's a very high amount of people that simply never pulled for Lupa because they don't like her. Now, Lupa is getting a rerun with Aemeath, which is very nice, but ultimately, there's still going to be quite a lot of people that just don't like Lupa and don't want to get her. So I can't simply have the expectation that everyone has Lupa and thus everyone can run Mortefi Lupa. Another negative is that Aemeath might be a little bit more questionable within Multiwave content. This is for 2 reasons. The first reason being that Toon Rupture damage scales on the enemy class, and within Multiwave, enemies are usually going to be a lower class. Within Whimpering Waste as an example, you're primarily going to be running into common echoes, as well as some elite echoes, and they are going to be taking a lot less damage from Toon Rupture than a boss would. So a pretty large chunk of Aemeath's damage output is going to be cut by a pretty decent amount, simply because you're not fighting a boss. Now, do I think this is going to end up becoming some kind of massive issue? Not really. I don't think it's going to end up being some sort of insane problem that makes Aemeath completely unviable in Multiwave. But it's definitely something to consider. If you're looking for someone who is going to absolutely dominate Multiwave content, you're better off waiting for something like a Falova rerun. It is kind of a nitpick in my opinion, because Aemeath still has more than enough abilities that are not dependent on the enemy's class. So ultimately, she will still be fine in Multiwave, it's just something to consider. The other issue is the fact that her debuff that she applies on enemies does not carry over in Multiwave. So ultimately, it means that the damage of her Toon Rupture is going to be decreased even more, which, yet again, might end up being a pretty decent negative when it comes to AoE content like Whimpering Wastes. But yet again, I think Aemeath is going to be completely fine and isn't going to be hurt too much. She might not end up being Furlova level in Multiwave after all, which is completely fine in my opinion. Furlova in Multiwave is just kind of overpowered, and I don't want them to make too many overpowered characters. So again, I don't think it's too big of an issue, but it is something to keep in mind. And then for her final con, her Fusion Burst mode is kind of just useless right now. Think of Aemeath's Fusion Burst mode like Confession Phoebe on release. It was in her kit, but no one was ever going to use it because there were simply no teams where it was applicable. But then we got Zani, who ended up using Confession Phoebe, and borderline needed it. So ultimately, it's not as if they're gonna put something in the character kit and then it's going to be completely worthless. That's not how Kuro Games works. We are going to get a Fusion Burst support in the future, and then we're gonna end up using that character with Aemeath and Chisa. So in the end, the Fusion Burst mode will be good. But if you want to get her right now, because you want Fusion Burst to be good immediately, you're going to be sorely disappointed by this. The Fusion Burst mode simply just won't be used. Even if you're running a team of Lene Chisa, you ultimately will actually want to prefer the Toon Break mode. Aemeath simply does not apply enough Fusion Burst on her own to make the Fusion Burst mode worth using. You're really gonna have to wait for that premium support to make the Fusion Burst Aemeath team actually feel good. But those are just my thoughts on Aemeath. Let me know what you think of her down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked down in the description below. And if you just want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked down in the description. Well, that'll be all from me. Peace.